Hello everyone, my name is Sam. I am a GP. Today I will be discussing about the different type of relatives, specifically first degree, second degree, and third degree relatives. This video is in relation to the cancer screening series of video that I will be doing. As usual, before I begin my presentation, I just want to show my disclaimer. Now let's begin. So there are three categories of relatives. They are first degree, second degree, and third degree relative. In cancer screening, a person's cancer risk is usually defined as average, moderate, or high, and is usually defined in relation to the number of relatives of that person that have contracted a certain cancer. Now we will begin with what a first degree relative is. A first degree relative is defined as a close blood relative that shares about 50% of a person's genetic makeup. There is no gap between that person and the other person, meaning that there is a direct relationship. This includes an individual's parents, full siblings, or children. For example, you are directly related to your father or children, as well as brother. In contrast, a second degree relative is also a blood relative, but shares about only 25% of a person's genetic makeup. This means that there is a gap between you and the other person. For example, between you and your grandparent, let's say your grandfather, there is either your mother or your father in between. Therefore, there is a gap between you and your grandfather or grandmother. Therefore, your grandfather or grandmother is defined as a second degree relative. In a similar way, there is a gap between you and your grandchildren. And the gap is either your son or your daughter, who is the father or mother of your grandchild. Other examples of second degree relatives include your uncles, your auntie, your nephews, your niece, or your half-siblings. And finally, we have got a third degree relative, who is also a blood relative, but on average only share about 12.5% of a person's DNA. In this situation, there are two gaps between you and the other person. Examples would include your first cousins, your great-grandparents, or your great-grandchildren. In the case of your first cousin, there are two gaps between you and your first cousin. This gap, let's say, a first cousin on your mother's side. The gaps would include your mother, and then your uncle or your auntie, and then it comes to your first cousin. So there are two gaps. In a similar way, there are two gaps between you and your great-grandparents. And the gaps are your father, your grandfather or grandmother, and then it comes to your great-grandfather or great-grandmother. So there are two gaps. I hope this presentation will help you understand more about what the difference are between the first degree relative, a second degree relative, and a third degree relative. This presentation is important because in subsequent videos, all cancer risks are defined in relation to the number of relatives, either first or second degree relatives that have contracted certain cancer. Thank you very much for watching my YouTube video. If you like my presentation, please kindly subscribe and share. Stay alive, stay safe, and stay healthy. Many thanks. Take care. Have a nice day.